Good evening, I'm Serena, and welcome to Inside News. Today is Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. On Inside News, we take you beyond the headlines to the stories that matter but often go untold. The conflict simmering beneath the surface, the diplomatic shifts reshaping our world, and the voices demanding to be heard. Tonight, we journey across 5 continents to bring you developments that will shape tomorrow's world. We begin in Africa, where political upheaval is testing democratic institutions across the continent. In Madagascar, President Andry Rajoelina dissolved his government today following deadly youth-led protests that swept through 8 cities. The demonstrations, sparked by persistent water and power cuts, claimed at least 22 lives, according to UN figures. Though Madagascar's foreign ministry disputes this, calling the data misinformation. Security forces deployed rubber bullets and tear gas as a curfew blanketed the capital, Antananarivo. These so-called Gen Z protests represent the most serious challenge to Rajoelina since his controversial 2023 re-election and echo the 2009 uprising that first brought him to power. The question now: can Madagascar's infrastructure crisis be resolved without further bloodshed? Moving south, South Sudan's fragile peace faces a critical test. A special court ruled today it has jurisdiction to prosecute suspended Vice President Riek Machar on charges of murder, treason, and crimes against humanity. The charges stem from a March militia attack that killed 250 soldiers. Machar's team argues the 2018 peace agreement mandates an African Union hybrid court, not a national one. The UN and neighboring states are urgently calling for calm as fears mount that these proceedings could reignite civil war in the world's youngest nation. And in a quieter but significant development, the Seychelles heads to a presidential runoff next week after no candidate secured the required majority. Opposition leader Patrick Hermany won 48.8% against incumbent President Wavel Remkalawan's 46.4%. This Indian Ocean archipelago now faces a week of intense political negotiation. In the Middle East, diplomatic developments and continuing violence dominate the landscape. President Trump unveiled a comprehensive 20-point Gaza peace proposal yesterday after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House. The framework calls for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages within days, and a board of peace chaired by Trump to oversee post-war Gaza governance. Netanyahu endorsed the plan, but the critical question remains: will Hamas accept? The Palestinian Authority welcomed the announcement, but they don't speak for Hamas. As the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th attack approaches, demonstrators in Tel Aviv continue calling for the war's end. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Office reported that since September 16th, at least 17 Israeli attacks have struck health facilities in Gaza City. 3 hospitals received direct hits: Al-Quds, Al-Rantisi Children's Facility, and the Medical Relief Health Center. The Jordanian Field Hospital evacuated to Khan Yunis after strikes. UN officials state escalating attacks on civilians and infrastructure have left the sick and injured with nowhere to go, raising serious questions about the protection of medical facilities under international law. Israel's international standing continues to erode. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself acknowledged in mid-September that Israel faces a kind of isolation that could last years. The European Union, Israel's largest trading partner, proposed partial sanctions last week that would suspend portions of the free trade agreement. Norway's massive sovereign wealth fund divested Israel holdings in August, and the cultural backlash intensifies. Ireland, the Netherlands, and Spain say they'll boycott next year's Eurovision if Israel participates. Thousands of Hollywood filmmakers, including Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield, have pledged not to work with Israeli institutions. The comparisons to South Africa's apartheid-era isolation grow louder. Across Europe, the continent grapples with ongoing conflict and economic decisions. Ukraine endured one of the war's most intensive bombardments overnight Sunday into Monday. A 12-hour assault involving nearly 600 drones, 46 cruise missiles, and 5 rockets. At least 4 people died, including a teenage girl, as Kyiv and Zaporizhia came under fire. A cardiology facility in Kyiv was struck, killing 2. The UN's Ukraine coordinator confirmed 12 deaths and over 100 injuries across the weekend, emphasizing the continuing trend of strikes on civilian centers. Nearly 3 years into this conflict, Russia demonstrates sustained capacity for large-scale, coordinated attacks with no diplomatic resolution in sight. In business news that went largely unnoticed, Linda Yaccarino stepped down last week as CEO of X, formerly Twitter, after 2 turbulent years. Her resignation signals potential strategic shifts for the platform, which has struggled with advertiser exodus and content moderation controversies under Elon Musk's ownership. No successor was announced. In the United States, a government shutdown looms tonight. The midnight deadline to pass funding legislation approaches, with Republicans and Democrats far apart. Republicans demand a clean stopgap bill with no policy additions. Democrats refuse unless healthcare negotiations occur, including on Obamacare tax credits. Senate Minority Leader Schumer says it's up to Republicans whether they shut down. House Speaker Johnson dismissed Democratic proposals as requesting $1.5 trillion in unrelated spending. With the House out of session this week and no passable bill on the table, a shutdown appears increasingly likely, potentially disrupting services for millions. President Trump announced yesterday a proposed 100% tariff on films produced outside the United States, following Disney's recent move of Marvel Productions from Atlanta to the UK. The White House provided no implementation details. Supporters say it could revive U.S. film jobs. Critics warn of retaliation and increased audience costs. This extends Trump's protectionist trade policy into entertainment. And the FBI is investigating Sunday's attack on a Mormon chapel in southern Michigan as targeted violence. A 40-year-old suspect drove a truck into the building, shot parishioners, and set the chapel ablaze, killing at least 4. 8 victims were hospitalized, ages 6 to 78. Suspected explosive devices were found. Authorities are still determining whether the attack was religiously motivated, but it raises renewed concerns about security at places of worship nationwide. Finally, developments in Asia and global health. Nobel laureate Maria Ressa delivered a stark warning at the UN yesterday. Artificial intelligence and big tech companies are fueling disinformation, eroding truth, and threatening democracy. She noted that 72% of the world now lives under the authoritarian rule, with democracies increasingly electing illiberal leaders. A 2024 UN report revealed 118 countries aren't party to any significant international AI governance initiatives. Only 7 developed nations participate in all of them. The message is clear. International cooperation on AI regulation is urgently needed. And in public health, the CDC reports U.S. measles cases have hit a 33-year high, fueled by a Texas outbreak that's claimed 3 lives. This highly contagious disease was declared eliminated from the U.S. in 2000 through vaccination. The current spike reflects declining vaccination rates and growing vaccine hesitancy. A stark reminder of what happens when coverage drops below herd immunity levels. Several other stories deserve your attention. South Africa was stripped of crucial World Cup qualifying points today after FIFA ruled they fielded an ineligible player against Lesotho in March. The sanction dropped them from first to second place, potentially devastating their qualification hopes. Somalia announced it will launch its first ever oil drilling operation in coming months. President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud called it a watershed moment. Though analysts warn without robust governance, resource wealth could fuel conflict rather than development. And Italian candy maker Ferrero announced plans last week to acquire American cereal maker Kellogg for $3.1 billion, uniting Nutella and Frosted Flakes under one corporate umbrella. A deal reflecting broader consolidation in the packaged food industry. From Madagascar's streets to Washington's corridors of power, from Ukraine's bombed cities to Somalia's untapped oil reserves, these are the stories shaping our world tonight. Stories that demand our attention, even when they don't make the loudest headlines. On Inside News, we believe that understanding the full picture requires looking beyond what's trending. It requires asking difficult questions, following complex threads, and listening to voices often left unheard. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Serena. Stay informed, stay engaged, and good journeys to all.